Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast. I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Tod Loofbourrow on the show. Todd, excited to have you on the show.
Gresh, it's great to be here.
Yes, super excited to have you on and talk about all the awesome things you're doing. And of course, before we do that, I wanted to read a little bit more about Todd so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Todd serves as chairman and CEO of ViralGains, a software as a service company dedicated to helping companies deepen their relationship with consumers using two-way digital advertising. Prior to ViralGains, Todd served as president of iRobot, where he helped grow market capitalization to $1 billion. Founder, chairman, and CEO of Authoria, now People Fluent, CEO of artificial intelligence consulting firm Foundation Technologies, Inc. Todd has also served as entrepreneur in residence at the Center for Digital Business at MIT since 2011, where he also judges the data science competition. As an author or editor of 7 books, including an anthology books series on AI and machine learning, Todd has shared his experience and lectured at Stanford, MIT Sloan School, and Harvard Business Schools, amongst many others. And one of the really cool things that I was looking at before preparing for this interview is that ViralGains is used by 100 of the Fortune 500 and one-third of the Fortune 400, Fortune 100, which is super awesome. And as I kind of talked about Todd's background, he's very well respected, very well versed in all the things that we're going to really dive in deep, for us today. But the thing that I think stuck out to me was like he's the definition of serial entrepreneur and thought leader. As I mentioned, the amount of books he was involved in, but he wrote the first a 20,000 copy trade bestseller on computer science and robotics, written at the age of 16, if I read that correctly, Todd. So super excited to have you on. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to speak to you guys.
Yeah, it's awesome. All the things that you're doing. So I guess to kind of kick everything off, let's rewind the clock, hear a little bit more on how you got started, what I call your CEO story.
Yeah, I mean, you talked a little bit about the early days. I was obsessed by robots when I was a kid. And I think a lot of
Mhm.
kids are obsessed with robots or dinosaurs. And I went through
Mhm.
the dinosaur phase and then got to robots and I wanted to build them. So I started playing around with mechanical things, trying to make a move. And eventually, these early microcomputers were coming out. So I got a little computer called the Kim 1, built a robot around it, gave some talks about it. A book editor saw the talk and said, "Hey, can you write a book about building a robot?" So I wrote a book called How to Build a Computer Controlled Robot. Wrote it when I was
Nice.
15. It was published when I was 16. And the darn thing sold 20,000 copies. So that kind of got me started in tech. And from there, I got more interested in, if you think of robotics as supplementing human muscle, and you think of AI as supplementing the human mind, I got more interested in that side of things. So every company I've started or worked at since has had AI running through it. Consulting firm that you mentioned in expert systems and neural nets, human resources software at Authoria, spinning out a bunch of companies from MIT, and now ViralGains in digital advertising. The common thread through all of them is this use of smart machines and AI.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I love that because it's stayed true and consistent to like it sounds like the essence of who you are. I often say like if you don't know who you are, sometimes you can go back and look at yourself at a young age and just hearing about the book and the seeds that were planted there and how they blossom into all the awesome things you've been able to do now.
And I think the thing that I would caution people who are starting out to think about is when you look from later in the career back, it all looks like it makes total sense. But when you're 22 and trying to figure it out, it doesn't seem like it's so easy. And so for me, looking back on it, in some ways, I can weave this thread of AI through all of it. But if you look at it another way, I was in consulting, I was in human resources software, I was in digital advertising. What the heck is that? What do they have in common? So,
Right.
really, for me, the common thread was trying to find things I love to do with people I love to work with that was intellectually stimulating, that could, pay the bills at least most of the time. When I started my first company, my co founder and I lived on Kraft macaroni and cheese.
Mhm.
And painted world corporate headquarters on the wall in paint. And, you know,
Nice.
but eventually you can find both. But it's not, when you're looking forward at the future, it's a lot harder than when you're looking backward at what you've done. And I really like the idea of just understanding that life is a river. You can't control it all, but you sure as heck can paddle.
I love that. That's so powerful, and I imagine I see that the image of you with world corporate headquarters like going viral. Like I don't know if you've seen the Jeff Bezos one where he had Amazon.com on the brown paper box or whatever. I see that
Uh-huh.
exact same thing. That kind of brought back memories of that as well too.
we had our first set of servers. We'd rented out an apartment for the building. So
Uh-huh.
originally, this was actually my second company. I had an apartment in a building, and I rented another apartment for the company. So I had a 14-step commute, just go up the stairs. It was great
Nice.
in Boston winters. The first set of servers, there was no place to put them, so I actually put them in the bathtub. We weren't using the bathtub
There
in
you
the
go.
business apartment, so there's literally somewhere a picture of a bathtub filled with servers that was
Yeah.
actually running the company. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, would come home and she'd be like, "Todd, have you left the building this week?" And I'd be like, I haven't.
I have to. You got everything there. Got the dream commute. So there you go. Nice. Well, I absolutely love that. So and actually, what you said to me also resonated because I'm sure you've heard the Steve Jobs commencement speech where he talks about like being able to connect the dots, looking backwards, you can't connect them looking forward. And I think being able to
Absolutely.
kind of lean into your passion, lean into those things that light you up. A lot of times we don't know, like you said so well, like where that river is going to take us, but we know that we can paddle towards that passion, paddle towards the thing that excites us, paddle towards that person that really lights us up and there's something interesting about them. So I really love that because it helps us realize that we can't control everything, but we can control some things and to lean into those things that we can control.
I think it's so important. And, like any river, there's going to be eddies and places you get stuck and
Yeah.
things you got to back up. And so I think it's a very apt metaphor for life because there's a flow that
Mhm.
goes through it that you can't control. I mean, look at the folks in Ukraine and, things going on in the world that you just can't control. But at the same time, you can really control where you point yourself and, what you point yourself toward. And you end up on a journey that's really fun if you go in it with the right attitude.
Yeah, absolutely ends up being really exciting, especially if you can look back and say, "Wow, I actually got to experience all that stuff." It really is the ultimate gift. That's why they call the present, right? Because it's so many awesome things that we can take into account. So I wanted to drill down a little bit more, hear a little bit more about viral gains, and could you take us through a little bit more on how that works, what you're doing to make an impact for your clients there?
For sure. The digital advertising space is massive. A couple of years ago, it passed television as the largest form of advertising there is. There are literally hundreds of billions of dollars that flow through it every year. And the way it's typically worked is by kind of spying on people as they go about their business on their phones and the internet and using that to target them. We take a different approach. We say, wait a minute, if I want to find out what Gresh is interested in, rather than spy on him, I'll just ask him. So we turn ads into interactive experiences. And so let's say you see an ad for, an electric truck. And instead of just watching the ad, we'll say, what do you like this truck? Or are you in the market for an electric car? Or what do you look for most in a truck? And, about 1%, maybe 2% of people will answer the question. We call that zero party data. So it's authentic connections with the consumer about what they care about. And then we use that, and then we use AI to generalize it to a large audience. So maybe 200,000 people might answer the question, but we'll generalize it to 20 million people. And then the advertiser can say, okay, these are the ones that I should talk to because they've already expressed interest or like the people who've expressed interest. So we're really trying to build a privacy first foundation for the digital advertising economy. And as you said, it's now 112 of the Fortune 500 and 36 of the Fortune 100.
Nice.
And so we're growing well, and we love our clients, and we love this sort of missionary way of rethinking the advertising business, focused more on privacy.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I love it because I think so many times when, and I feel like the big transformation that we've seen on through all types of media is that it used to be like you put something out and that's it. But now you start to see you put something out and then you start to have that opportunity to have a conversation, have that interaction, and that's why I love that because I think we are kind of doing ourselves a disservice if we don't see any type of content that we're creating, especially that video piece, as an opportunity to open up the door for a deeper conversation, deeper relationship, deep more information as well too. So being able to kind of, of course, have that interaction, and then of course, as you mentioned, scale that to be able to make some pretty powerful, I guess, resolutions or conclusions is extraordinary.
Yeah, it really is. It's a transformative way of thinking about advertising because people are used to thinking of it as one way. But in fact, as social media has shown, people want to have their voice heard. And so, if there's a way to make something more interactive and more authentic, you build relationships that scale. And after all, people want to work with companies that they believe in. They may have shared values. They may have, the products that work really well. They do the right things when things go wrong. Years ago, I had an iPhone, and it broke. I brought it into the Apple store, and they said, "Oh, we'll just give you a new one." Now they don't do that anymore. But
Yeah.
boy, in that moment, Apple cemented my loyalty for life because
Right.
you're used to the hassle return experience you'd get going into a retail store. Suddenly the guy's like, oh, it didn't work. All right, here's a new one. And so that kind of relationship building that a great company does in person, there's no reason they can't do that when they first reach a prospective customer, and that's advertising.
Yeah, I love that, and I think again, it's just kind of looking at things in a different way. I think so many times, like I guess I say we so many times can get more attached to the how rather than the why, and it's like okay, we had this way that we were doing business, that's the how, and we forget about the why we're doing. We're doing it to build those relationships. So even though the how changes, now we're doing it in a different way. We're doing it through media and social media. There's so many different ways that we kind of say, oh, well, we don't know how to connect to our why, but it's just thinking about things differently, maybe executing it and looking at it from a different way.
And I think that's a great definition of an entrepreneur, because an entrepreneur, as Bobby Kennedy said, and I think he borrowed it from George Bernard Shaw or something. And I have to go back and look. I don't look at the world and see it the way things are. I look at the world the way it should be and say, why not?
Right.
And that I think is such a great quote for how entrepreneurs think, which is you look around yourself and you say, well, wait a minute, why does it work that way? And most of the time there's not a good reason. Most of the time, it just is. And so, I think the struggle of being an entrepreneur is change is hard, and it takes a while for people to make change. In the digital advertising space, the TV people were in charge for 20 years, and the TV people thought of it as an ad as something I talk at someone with. And yet the digital generation came in and said, no, wait a minute. It's IP addressable. You can do as much in an ad as you can do in an app on your phone. So why not turn it into an interactive medium? And over time, people have started to say, oh, wait a minute, that's possible. But I think of entrepreneurship as banging your head against a brick wall until the brick wall crumbles. And then you walk through, and everybody says, what brick wall? And how'd you get way up there? And that's
Yeah.
that's that's everything. You got to be willing to be different and be a maverick and have everyone say that won't work. And then you find your way, and suddenly you learn along the way, and you're ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, especially, being that trailblazer and being able to kind of, go through that brick wall, as you said so well. I think we often say like what it takes to be that maverick, to be that leader, or to blaze that trail. You have to like really like lead people and get people to be behind you. But I think the reality is that you kind of alluded to, sometimes you are the only one going through that brick wall, and you're going and trying to get people to follow you after the fact, after you've done everything. You don't see anybody being a follower to a person that's a maverick often, because there's like, why are you doing it? That's crazy. That's not going to happen. But they have that belief. They go through that brick wall, and then all of a sudden people start following them.
And you're right though that the ability to get people to follow you is another thing. So there's that time when you're kind of alone beginning things, and
Mm,
I use that rule when you're hiring. And often as a startup grows and gets bigger, you
mm,
bring in people from larger companies who have more experience because they can scale things.
right.
And my test for someone from a large company is always this: if the trash can is full, what do you do? And if an entrepreneur empties the trash,
Right.
a big company person sometimes says, "Where's that trash emptying person?" And
Right.
and, when you're an entrepreneur, you look around the first time you start a business, and you're like, "Where's that? Oh yeah, it's me." And
Yeah.
so it's that instinct to say, "I want to get in and solve problems, not I
Right.
want to build an empire or I want somebody else to do it." That I think characterizes entrepreneurial intent or DNA. And then as people get the skills of building things with scale, I think a lot of entrepreneurs have a tough time making the transition from those maverick days to scale. And so if you find yourself on the top of the next hill, but your whole team is back on this hill, you got to look around and say, now, wait a minute, maybe the maverick way isn't the way forward now. Maybe it's about the phrase I use is participation builds buy in. So if
Mm,
you're coming down off the hill saying this is the way it's going to be, guys, that's not leadership.
right.
Leadership is saying, okay, this is where I think it's really important for us to go. Now let's talk it through. What do you think? What do you think? And you bring a diversity of perspectives, you bring a diversity of skills, you bring a diversity of company sizes and backgrounds, and then you get to a decision and go forward. And sometimes everyone won't agree, but at least you've had a broader perspective, and at least the troops come with you, and you find yourself on the next hill with a whole army as opposed to standing by
Right.
yourself.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I often have the visual of I heard it years ago from like a business coach where he says a lot of times to go to the next rung, like you're a kid on the jungle gym. In order to go to the next rung, you have to let go of the previous rung. If you don't, then you're going to be stuck there because you're just swinging. But like you said so well, you have to, for lack of a better term, sometimes completely analyze that previous person, the previous organization in order to get to that next level, to get to that next rung, to get to that next hill, whatever it is that you're trying to get to. And the not only do you need to do that, it could actually hurt you by not doing that to get to that next level of the journey.
No, and it's so hard. It's so few founders who scale all the way, and I'm
Mm,
always rooting for the founders who can scale. But I think to me the three skills you need in a startup are you got to be smart at a certain level, you got to be collaborative, and you got to be humble. And it's usually that humble one that trips us folks in tech because you can find smart, you can sometimes find collaborative, you can't always find humble. But I think it's the combination of those three that gives people the grace to say later, well, wait a minute, I may be pretty good at sales. I may be pretty good at product management. I may be pretty good at coding, but I'm going to hire someone who is just the best person I can possibly find and give them not just the task, but the responsibility. And I'm going to
mm.
let go and I'm not going to meddle. And that's the hardest part, I think, for early stage founders. And often people can get from 0 to 5 million. And there's a inflection point there. And then there's another one at 20. And then there's another one at about 100 million. And at each of those stages, you have to learn different skills as a CEO and you have to behave differently and you have to let your team have more of the responsibility or you won't scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, just from a humanistic standpoint, change is hard, change is difficult. It's not something that we kind of run into. So whether we're talking about changing people's interactions with things that they're doing, or even changing ourselves so that we can move on within organizations, is something that it's not as easy as it sounds. So I appreciate you so much and sharing that information. So do you feel like part of this could be your secret sauce or the company's secret sauce or a combination of both? Do you feel like it's your ability to be able to kind of see the forest for the trees, to be able to kind of understand, the AI part and how that interacts in all the businesses and be able to see like how that works, but also understand like what it truly takes to build a company? Do you think by being able to kind of see that that is part of like your secret sauce or the company's secret sauce or a combination?
Yeah, let me start with the company secret sauce because
Okay.
what Viral Gains is basically all about is creating that interactive relationship with someone, turning that into an understanding of where that person is in regard to that brand. Are they at awareness? Are they at consideration? Are they actually getting closer to purchase? And then making sure that our customers can get the right message to that person. So it's using zero party data and AI to do those two things. And those are really our secret sauce. It's those two things, zero party data and AI. And we're deep in AI and we've been doing zero party data for half a dozen years, which is why we have so many customers and why it's growing so fast. I think
Nice.
for me, it's some of the stuff we talked about. It's learning to be different at the different stages. And one of the ways I learned was I'm part of a CEO forum where a group of us get together once a quarter for 2 days. That's a big commitment of time. But I've been involved with this group for years and years. And I learned so much in that forum about how the role changes over time. I can bring my toughest issues to those folks and they can give me an unbiased view. They're not your board. They're not judging you. They're not your team. They're not worried if you're uncertain. They're just there to help you vet tough issues. And I think peer networks are really important. I think mentors are super important. I always put on my board in the outside director seats people who have run billion-dollar companies or have more expertise than I do in the space I'm in, or have a set of skills that maybe I'm a 5 on a 1 to 10 scale and they're a 10. Because if I'm not learning, I'm not growing, and if I'm not growing, it's hard to have everyone around me grow.
Yeah, that's so powerful, and I think a lot of it goes back to what we talked about before. It's almost like that ego. That ego can be the thing that makes you blaze that trail. Slam your arm or your head against that brick wall, and you believe that you can do this and create it. But at the same time, that can be your downfall. But I think one of the biggest signs of that is being able to be in those rooms, be in those places where you're not the best, you're not number one at all those things. And I love that the group and being a part of that, because I think it allows people to be iron sharpening iron, because sometimes we have those things that we're really really great at that we can contribute to somebody else, and vice versa, where we're sometimes weak, they might be great. And I think that's where you have that iron sharpening iron.
No, I think you're right. You can have a team of all tens if you allow people to outshine you in the things you're not great at. I remember freshman year, I came into college. Actually, all my roommates came into college thinking we were going to be physics majors, and only one majored in physics. And it's for the same reason. We all audited the physics weed out course called Physics 55. And I
Hmm.
remember it to this day. I was sitting in the room. There's all these people there, smart looking people. I thought I'd done pretty well in high school, was pretty smart, good at math, all these things. And the professor's up there on the board like this. And as my professor colleague today puts it, it's 2023 and I still teach people by taking a rock and scraping it against the other rock on the wall. So education has a long way to go. But he's up there on the board,
Right.
right? All these formulas. And then he goes, so what does that derive to? And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, come on. You're joking. Are you kidding me? It's like a board full of, and the guy next to me goes, it's intuitively obvious. It's C cosine P factor. I'm like, check, please. I am not competing with this guy for 4 years.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so funny because I often say, if you run your own race, you can't lose, and I feel like that person is in a different race, and you're like, hey, this is my race. I'm gonna stay true to this. Let me find this as quickly as possible so that I can lean into that.
And I think what you're saying is quite profound. If you really can muster the courage to run your own race, and it's hard. It's easier to follow someone else's track. It's easier to do what your parents want you to do, what your peers are doing, or what gets you more money earlier, and all these things. But if you really can summon the courage to run your own race, you're going to be the best at it because
Yeah,
it's what you're passionate about, and you'll make 100 mistakes, and that's all right because you'll learn so much that by the time you get to where you want to be, other people won't even understand why or how, but it's
yeah.
because you made 99 mistakes on the way to the 100th one, which mattered less.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I love everything you've been able to build and how you combine, the AI and zero party details. Because it sounds like a culmination of everything you've been working on and that build up of those things without, like we talked about the river, not even knowing that you were creating it, but you're just kind of going through that path. So I love how that, secret sauce for yourself personally also ebbs into like everything that you've been able to kind of do and build as well too.
Yeah, and I teamed up with a guy named Dan Levin, who's our president, who had,
Hmm.
had started this company, and he had built a couple of media agencies,
Hmm.
and he was very good at social media. He could get himself on the front page of Reddit whenever he wanted because he'd reverse engineered their algorithm.
Yeah.
Just brilliant, brilliant media guy. And I didn't know advertising. I was an AI guy, but I'd done robots and human resources and steel making and all these things. So we teamed up, and his sort of genius in ad agencies and advertising and persuasion and the technology of social media and my background in AI is what created the synergy we have now at ViralGains.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Bringing those again, having those two tens or more, in that room and being able to kind of step aside and say, you're great at this, I'm great at this. How do we merge and meld that together to have a beautiful recipe? So it's super phenomenal that you all been able to do that. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. And we might have already touched on this, but it could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have. But what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Yeah, I think to me, the biggest one is that peer network, is that idea of finding a group of peers you can talk to on a consistent basis. That's probably been the biggest one because at key moments in my journey as a CEO in different companies, do you raise the big round or do you sell? Do you buy a company or do you not? You need to change your people, all these things, all these hard decisions you have to make as a CEO. To have a group of peers was massive. More recently, I've actually loved the book Atomic Habits, which I think is
Mm,
pretty well known, but it's just terrific for changing the way you start your day or changing the way you do things, and just this notion that you can improve 1% per day, and suddenly in a year's time you're 50% better or different. I've used that a lot to just make sure that my habits and the way I approach problems live up to my sort of vision and where I want to be and who I want to be.
yeah, I absolutely love that, and that's definitely a quote unquote oldie but goodie. But I love the practicality of it because I always butcher this quote, but it's the quote where your minutes become your days, your days become your weeks become your year. We sometimes forget how practical it is around the things that we're doing on a daily basis, decisions, the habits we have, and how that amounts to the life that you have, for better or sometimes for not so good. But either way, it can be usually attributed to those habits that we have.
Yeah, for sure. I think maintain a vision and a sense of mission and the stuff you're doing and a long term view is so important. But also, what do you do each day to get there?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with setbacks? And how do you make sure it's two-step forward and one step back and not the other? Because that's all the difference.
Yeah.
Compounding works both ways.
Exactly, exactly, for better or worse. And I love that peer groups kind of how you've been able to dial into that. Do you feel like especially going on along the journey, we talked about going through that brick wall. Do you feel like sometimes it can be so isolating that you feel like you're by yourself? You feel like maybe like you're doing it wrong, but by having that constant interaction, that outlet, that time, you feel like, first of all, you're not by yourself, but also get the opportunity to kind of, sharpen those saws, so to speak, so that you are able to figure out some solutions to problems.
Yeah, I mean, you run across a lot of problems as a CEO, particularly in tech and a startup. There's just there's a problem to deal with every day or every week, but you're not going to run into all of them. And
Yeah.
you're going to. So if you widen your network to people who have run into other kinds of problems before, you rapidly increase your learning pace. I'll give you a story from my CEO forum. So
Hmm.
there was a company in the forum that makes let's call it a carbonated beverage unit for offices and gyms and things like that. And,
Hmm.
very successful company, growing really fast. And there was another guy in the forum who was running a company doing trading software. Seems completely different. But he'd started his career back at Xerox in the days of Xerox copiers.
Yeah.
And they were talking to one of the forums, and the fellow with the Xerox experience said, one of the big things, and he was trying to get his margins up. The fellow who ran the soda thing was trying to get his margins up. And the fellow who had been at Xerox said, one of the things we did at Xerox was we put a lot of energy into figuring out how to make a copier user serviceable so the customer could just pop in a new cartridge
Right.
because we were sending people out there every time they needed to be refilled. And that's what this guy was doing. And the beverage company, send people out, send a technician, tune it. And he said, look, if you just make it user serviceable, your economics will change. Sure enough, he changed on a dime at that meeting.
Hmm.
They started building out their own user serviceable packs that they could mail out to customers, and the economics of the business changed. But who would have thought that a guy who grew up in the garment district and worked for Xerox, at the beginning of his career when he was a kid, would have advice to give to a cool, funky beverage company in 2015 or 2016? But that's the value of it: is people, you're tapping into not just one life, you're tapping into 10 lives who have been through the struggle, and that's great.
Yeah, I absolutely love that, and I bring up this book so often because it's been absolutely one of my favorites. I don't know if you heard the book called Range. Um, but it talks a lot around the solutions of tomorrow belong to the people that have a range of experiences. And of course, you personally can have those range of experiences, but on another level, you can see further by standing on the shoulders of giants. So if you are around
Absolutely.
people that have had different experiences, it allows you to look at things, especially the problems of tomorrow, because the problems are tomorrow are not siloed. They're very interconnected, and they rely on each other so much that you have to have those range of experiences to be able to solve them, to come up with the solutions for tomorrow. So that really made me think of that, because you're like, I'm in this industry, I do this thing. How would this other person that's in a completely different industry be able to help me out? But that's where having those range of experiences, or at least people around you, can serve to your advantage.
No, I really agree with that approach. And I noticed that first in college because everything is siloed and deep. And you learn all these interesting things in school, but they're all siloed, and all the professors are siloed, and the doctors are siloed,
Right.
and the lawyers are siloed. And I noticed it in Boston that the tech community all knew each other, but there's a biotech community, and we didn't know any of those CEOs. And there's an advertising community, we didn't know any of those guys. And I always found as an entrepreneur that the best innovations happen at the juncture between two disciplines, just as you're saying,
Mhm.
in between two silos. And so my two patterns for tech, for starting new businesses, one is look at the junctures. Look at, in the case of my current business, the juncture between television and social media. And that juncture was interactive advertising. TV wasn't interactive, it was broad. Social media, was a completely different animal, and it was interactive. We put the two together for digital advertising. My other rule is platform shifts in tech change everything. So
Mhm.
my friends Anil Bushri and Dave Duffield have built the same company three times: Integral and Software, and then PeopleSoft, and then Workday. And what's
Mhm.
different each time? It's HR software and software for managing your business, and they've been very successful. But it's the same darn problem with just a platform shift. The first one was client server. The next one was software as a service. And the new one is, distributed software as a service, using AI and a different architecture and using Amazon Web Services and all those sorts of things. So
Right.
whenever there's a platform shift, everything changes. There's a new opportunity. The
Mhm.
iPhone, the PC was one, the iPhone was one, and the app economy. Social media was another. Now we have AI. And AI is creating a platform shift in so many businesses that there's an opportunity in every business to change how it works.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that so much. It's so funny that you brought up the iPhone because I think I'd read the same thing about the iPhone. How it was the convergence of those different. I'm going to use the word junctions now. Now that I know that, I'm going to use the
Yeah,
word junction because you see that it's the music industry, it's the technology, it's all these things coming together, and it's not necessarily a new or different idea, but to be able to kind of execute it in a unique way that takes into account each of these different kind of what seems like disparate, I guess inputs is really how you get that true innovation and how you break through the noise.
absolutely. Steve Jobs is one of my business heroes. Another one is
Hmm.
Jacques Cousteau, who invented the aqualung and
Hmm.
opened the oceans to all of our views. So we care about protecting them. But and I've watched a lot of Jobs speeches, including the one where he introduces the iPhone and kind of
Yeah.
breaks open the idea that you don't need a keyboard, that you can do it on the screen. But there's an
Hmm.
earlier one that's a little harder to find, but it's years before the iPhone. And someone asks him, "How are you going to compete with Sony?" Because Sony had the Walkman and they were the dominant music
Right.
player. And he
Right.
says, "Oh, that's because they're not a software company. You just watch what we can do."
Mm.
Now, his self conception of Apple was, we're a software company. We don't think of Apple that way, but he did. And he had a little slide he'd done in that presentation where he said, playing music, doing business tasks, talking on the phone, running applications. And he said, these four things should be on one device. And this was years before the iPhone. But it was
Right.
that juncture. It was that little juncture between these different areas that he said, wait a minute, if I put a giant standing on those two pillars,
Right.
and you're not standing on the shoulders of one giant, you're standing on the shoulders between two giants.
Yeah.
So
Or
maybe we'll,
more.
we'll recast that metaphor a little bit and find the
Yeah.
junction, and that's where the opportunities are.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, if you look, you look down deeper and deeper, you start to see you're standing on giants that are standing on giants that are standing on giants. So that's when those truly, phenomenal innovations happen. So I absolutely love that. So I wanted to ask you now for what I call a CEO nugget, and I would love if you can tell us a little bit more around this AI. I know we brought up it a couple of times, and I know it's very important to the things that you are doing. But what advice? It could be a word of wisdom, piece of advice, or things that you would give to organizations that are looking to incorporate AI or just things that we should know about, the impact that's here. I would say coming, but it's here.
I like the way you asked the question, so I'm going to try to answer as succinctly as I can in one word, and that
Okay.
one word is play. So
Mm.
I think that the key to what's going on in AI now is you can approach it with fear, or you can approach it with a spirit of play, and they're so different. And this generative AI wave, this new wave of AI, now, the perceptron, which was the beginning of the neural network architecture, was invented in 1965. So it's not as if this hasn't been coming for a while. Neural nets really came of age in the 1980s and 1990s, but it's these new architectures and new algorithms that have caused these amazing moments where we've all played with ChatGPT and we've said, write me a limerick in the style of Taylor Swift, and boom, it writes it.
Right.
And That's just gotten everyone's attention. So while it's natural to have lots of questions about, what that could do to jobs, is it going to incorporate biases, is it going to wake up one day and, terminate us all, which I think is overblown personally.
Yeah.
Um, I would say lean into the sense of play and lean into the opportunity to learn and lean into the opportunity to collaborate with these tools in whatever you're doing. If I'm writing an article now, I might start by saying to ChatGPT, here are the things I'm trying to do. How would you write it? And then look at what it did and say, oh, okay, there's some good ideas there. And now it's going to make some things up because that's one of the problems it has.
Yeah.
But as a place
Hallucinations.
to start, it's great. Same with pictures. I often, if I'm thinking, oh, geez, my elbow hurts, do I go check that out with the doctor? I go to ChatGPT. It says, here's 6 things it might be. Oh, great. Okay, now I know what to do, and maybe I should rest it for a couple days before I get back on the weights. So I think play with these things. It's not hard. Go into OpenAI, open a free account, start asking it to do wacky things, write songs, write poems, do some analysis. Do the same thing with DALL-E or Midjourney. There's hundreds of these tools. There's a newsletter I love called Ben's Bites, which
Hmm.
is just a daily, short, well written newsletter that says, here are 5 or 10 new tools that came out today, and I'll inevitably go to one or two and play with them. So approach it with the spirit of play. We did something in our company called AI Play Day, where we said,
Hmm.
everybody, go play with these tools. We'll show you how to use them. If you have any questions, just come in and show us what you came up with. And we had an employee who's writing a children's book. about Fiona the turkey who lives in Harvard Square. It kind of is like Make Way for Ducklings, if you know that children's book,
Mhm.
illustrated by Midjourney.
Mhm.
And, it's phenomenal. She couldn't create that on her own. Now she can.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot more effectively and efficiently, I imagine as well too. But I love I love that answer just because I think there's such a kind of fear or apprehension around what that is, but that play word is so powerful because I think there's so many exciting things that come from play, and often, especially as adults, let alone like CEOs, founders, business owners, we don't allow ourselves to play. And we can sometimes even beat ourselves up about creating that space. But I think that's where the creativity and opportunity come from because I think the world of tomorrow is kind of being written as we speak now, but you want to start to play, you want to start to interact, you want to start to be part of it, but you're not part of that if you aren't kind of giving yourself that space to be able to have those opportunities to experiment, or even especially creating that within organizations as well too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to businesses, because my advice was really more how an individual should approach it, but a business
Yeah.
should do the same thing. They should give
Mhm.
people an opportunity to play. They should try new ways of doing things and just experiment. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't necessarily have to deploy a help desk in your call center to answer all the questions when it's still making stuff up. But you sure want to be playing with these technologies, seeing what they can do. And they're moving very fast. And I lean into the opportunity it creates us for us to make jobs better. People worry, I think, quite rightly about jobs being automated away by AI. I think that's a genuine thing to be concerned about and to work against. But it's also jobs can be made. You can make onboarding faster with AI. So there have been some studies done that say, if you used to wait 6 months before you put someone on the phone in a call center because of all the training, now the people who come in fresh can be on the phone in 2 weeks and be just as good as the average person who was trained 6 months. So I think it creates opportunities to lower barriers for employment as well as opportunities to do automation. And people should lean into those kinds of applications too.
Yeah, I love that, and I don't know if you've heard this quote. I've heard it around AI. Is you're not gonna quote unquote lose your job to AI. You might lose your job to somebody using AI, and I think it is that same
Absolutely.
approach when you're able to use it. To me, like it ends up complementing the human part. It's not either or. It's actually both. So how can you put
Yeah,
both of those
for
things
sure.
together so that you can be more efficient, so that you can start answering those calls like you mentioned, in 2 weeks instead of 6 months or however long that it might take normally. You now have a leg up to be able to be more impactful, and organizations have that opportunity to do that as well too.
Absolutely. And it doesn't take that long to learn them. There is nobody in the world who has more than a year experience with GPT-4
Yeah.
because it's only been out 6 months. So
Yes.
you're not behind anybody. Just get in there and play, and you'll catch up fast. And whatever your medium of choice is, if you like TikTok, there's a million TikToks on AI and how to learn it. If you like newsletters, there's great ones on Substack and Medium. If you're still going to X, there's stuff on X. There's all kinds of places you can learn about these technologies and lean into the sense of fun, and you'll find some stuff that gives you a spark.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely beware of somebody who's been working with GPT for like the last 10 years. That might not be something
Exactly.
that's true or not. we
That's
that
right.
is not a we won't call that a hallucination. That's actually somebody
Yeah, yeah.
just not telling you
Your
the
BS
truth.
detector should be on max when someone says that.
Exactly. Exactly. So be wary of that. But absolutely love that. Appreciate that advice and that word of wisdom and advice that you gave. So I wanted to ask you now my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Todd, what does being a CEO mean to you?
I think it's the best job in the world because you have a chance to picture the way the world should be and make it so. And it is not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. And there's lots of barriers, and everyone's going to tell you no at the beginning. But if you're the kind of person who loves to dream and then loves to make your dreams into reality, if you're the kind of person who loves to have a team around you of great people, where you get an opportunity to pick the people you work with and help grow and mentor people and have them be a better version of themselves because they had a chance to spend time with you on something you're building together. There's nothing more fun in the world, and I wouldn't trade the job for anything.
Nice. I love that perspective and that definition. Almost, you get the opportunity, it's the Gandhi quote, to be the change you wish to see in the world. And I think when
Mm,
you're able to do that, we sometimes don't realize like how we literally have that opportunity every single day with the leadership and things that we're involved in. You can be that change. You create that environment for the people that are on your team, for yourself, that ends up spilling into the families and so many other places in this world. But I think it's so important and imperative for us to remember that we can ultimately be that change.
yeah, for sure. It's hard. It's easy to lose perspective on history, but we live in this unique time in a country that allows us to do anything we want, and the freedom to create and bring in people from so many different backgrounds that we have here in the U.S. is just phenomenal. I think. And so, I think, if you want to take a risk, take the risk, give it a shot. You can always go back and do something else, but you're going to learn so much on an entrepreneurial journey that's going to, make you a better person, make you a better leader, make you a better peer, and, give you a chance to run at a dream for a while and follow that river and just keep on pedaling.
Yeah, it's so funny that sometimes we think the worst pain is the pain of failure, but it actually is the pain of regret, of never trying, never taking that leap, never testing out that idea, writing that book, whatever it might be. If we never ever try to do those things, we'll never ever know what it could be or could not be. And even if it doesn't go the way we want it to go, sometimes that puts you in a better place, or sometimes you just find out one of the 100 ways that it didn't work, and you continue to kind of move on, with that too. So, Todd,
And
truly
it's interesting.
appreciate that.
And I think entrepreneurs who failed at something are better at their craft,
Mm.
because they learn, so much in things that didn't work, including humility, which is a great characteristic that often is a learned characteristic.
Yeah.
What was that? There's a great Mark Twain quote. It's more about, relationships between kids and their sons than this, but it's sort of on target. He says, when I was 20, I was convinced my dad didn't know anything. Now that I'm 30, I'm amazed what the old guy learned in 10 years. And that sort of applies to, you got a lot of hubris when you're starting out, but man, that
Yeah.
that hubris, if you can turn it into action and turn it into energy and be inclusive in that energy and not
Mhm.
egotistical in that energy, you can create things you only dream of. And my other maxim, other than participation builds buy-in, is
Uh-huh.
small things lead to big things. And
Yeah.
so, if you're around tech long enough, you see the beginnings of Google, you see the beginnings of Snowflake, and it's, a couple of people with an idea. And boy, small things can be big. If you find the right area, you stand on those shoulders between the junctures,
Mhm.
you're inclusive about who you bring in, and let participation build buy-in from a growing team. And at worst, you fall flat on your face and you learn a ton, and you get some good stories to tell the next time you try something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you realize that a lot of the people that are quote unquote most successful, I think this is such a misconception, is that they failed not just a little bit, they probably have failed a lot. And I think the quote is that success is a lousy teacher, because as you said so well, a lot of times when you fail, it actually gives you that data point, to know that, okay, this is not what we need to pivot. Usually they're just they're dogged in their desire to be able to reach success, and they're going to pivot and pivot and pivot until they find out where that success is, and then they look like the overnight success.
For sure. And we're used to thinking of school, then work, then retirement as sort of a path. And no, it's all about lifelong learning. You're learning your whole life. And the the journey you're on, you're going to learn things that are unique over time because you've gone this way and this way and moved between areas. And all of a sudden, you'll see patterns in the stuff you've learned and said, wait a minute, this could work this way. I picked this up over here and I could try it over
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah.
you'd be amazed what you can build if you only give yourself permission to try.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely give yourself that permission. So Todd, truly appreciate that definition, that perspective, all the awesome things you're doing. What I wanted to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know, and of course, how best people can get a hold of you, your team, find about all the awesome things you're working on.
Yeah, so the company is ViralGains, and VIRALGAINS, and it's just viralgains.com. So that website will give them all the information they need to know about what we do and how we got there. Best ways to reach me, probably on X, formerly Twitter. I'm at Todd at MIT, so TODAT MIT, because I still have a role at MIT. In fact, I'm judging the MIT data science competition very shortly here. It's coming up.
Nice.
And so those are probably the best ways to do it. On LinkedIn, you can always find me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And to make it even easier, we're going to have the links and information in the show notes as well too, so that everybody can follow up with you. But truly appreciate you taking some time out, all the awesome things that you share with us, all the awesome things you're doing, and I think it's ultimately that reminder. I see the art behind you, and as you were giving your definition and hearing your story and your journey, I often think we forget that we're often the artists of our worlds, our lives, and that we can paint the canvas in the way that we see fit. We can run our race the way that we see fit, but we don't do that unless we participate. We take that action, we take that leap, we do those things. So I appreciate you so much in doing that, because it's a great reminder of us to do that as well too. So thank you so much, my friend, and I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
You as well, Gresh. This was fun. Thanks.